For our last interview, we've invited Robert Ferguson, manager of the newly created Instructional Web team. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So the Instructional Web team hasn't always existed. Can you talk a little bit about how it came to be?
Sure. I've been building web projects at ACC for 7 or 8 years now, and something that we've seen time and time again is a lack of support for content authors and content publishers at ACC. A fact of life with the web is that it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, it's constantly getting more and more complicated, and it's really impractical to ask content authors and content publishers to sort of focus on their message, focus on their content, focus on teaching classes, focus on running whatever other parts of the college they might be dealing with, and also handling this technical burden of, publishing content, managing content, dealing with encryption and security and accessibility and scaling and servers and all these different things. So for the last 3 years, we've been really pushing for ACC to come up with some kind of group that provides ongoing support for content authors and helping them deal with the technical burden of publishing and managing content.
So the team is taking a full service approach to their process.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the first part of the process is generally content strategy. We have 2 content strategists right now, including you. The first step in thinking about a web project is, what is the message, what is the client trying to say? And from a publishing standpoint, there are different tricks and best practices when organizing web content that an author may not understand, as far as breaking the content into chunks, using headings appropriately, organizing the thoughts and ideas in a way that users can easily scan and parse, because we're finding that very often users don't read in depth, they'll just scan the headings. If the content does not seem relevant, then they'll just bounce and leave the page. So getting that content well structured is always the first step. And then from that, we can take that content and then start to use the other tools to present that in a better way. So the content would then move to design, and then the designer would look at how many pages there are, what is the structure of this project, what types of interactions do we need, are there quizzes, is it just straight up reading content? Are there forms to fill out, that sort of stuff. And then the designer will use best practices to come up with an accessible and inclusive design that works for the widest audience possible. So there are color contrast issues to take into account. There are web fonts that may or may not have pitfalls. There are different graphics, video, basically the whole thing. There are accessibility issues with each one of these things that we need to keep in mind. Once the design is sort of fleshed out and everything's looking good, then that moves to the front-end development team. Those folks will then take the design and start to turn it into a working web page. Up until this point, it's just graphics, it's just comps, it's just prototypes and ideas that need to be fleshed out. The front-end team then takes those ideas and really puts the code and programming in place. There are accessibility issues with dealing with interactions, dealing with mobile views versus desktop views. Different features may not be well supported on both, and so there's all these different parts that come into play in the front-end development stage. Once the front-end development is done, then it gets transferred to the back-end developers, which they run the servers. So we have all of our servers are hosted on Amazon Web Services. They're sort of infinitely scalable. They have really great uptime. They can handle basically anything we throw at it. Those folks manage that, make sure that it's running, make sure that it's published, make sure that the URLs are right, make sure that the structure is right. Once that's done, it's live, and we can start to, over time, start to gather the data from what's happening with this site and put together a picture of how users are really working with the project. We can sort of guide users through good design, but we cannot dictate behavior to users. They're going to do what they want to do. So if when designing this project, we are asking the users to do A, then B, then C. We can just hope and put the design in place that sort of guides them through that path, but the users may decide that they want to go to Google, type in C, and go straight to C. And now A and B is skipped. And the data analysis, the analytics will sort of give us a more complete picture of what the users are actually doing. Then if we find that there is some really unexpected behavior, then we can start this process again and start to iterate on what we've got and see how we can improve the process, improve the experience for users so that the author's message is actually being communicated how they intended it to be.
So for example, if department website, the analytics for that site that's been published that you helped build, that your team helped build, comes back with, nobody's using this information, nobody's clicking on this page.
Right.
So you would go back and revisit and say, well, maybe we need to delete that page.
Yeah, how relevant is it? And if we find that the author thinks that this is super important, they need to know about this, but no one is actually reading it, then we've got to tweak the design. We've got to change the navigation structure, change the way that buttons and calls to action are laid out. Maybe they just don't know, maybe they don't want to, maybe it's buried too deep in the stack, those types of issues. Then we can start to go back with the client and start to talk about these things once we have some data on user behavior.
So the department website gets built, so you don't actually just leave them alone. You actually continue to work with them.
No, what we're here to do is support the client on their projects for the entire lifespan of the project. So as long as it is live and on the web, we are here to support them and make sure that everything is running smoothly. If there are any fixes or changes, we're available to take care of those and fix any problems that come up.
Great. So what kind of projects is the Instructional Web team working on currently?
Well, we have a lot in the planning phase. Probably the biggest one right now is the public and social services area of study. That is, we're taking sort of a top-down approach. Like we're starting with the area of study and then looking at all the different little pieces that are inside there, all the little different departments, and trying to come up with, well, we're in the content strategy phase right now. So we're working on what the site map is like, what kinds of content are actually in this thing, and then from there we'll develop a design that feels to the user like each department in this area of study feels like it belongs and goes together, and then from a higher level that this area of study belongs at ACC and goes with the rest of the style and marketing efforts that the college is doing.
Great. And you're also working on the online catalog?
Yeah, that's taking the PDF version of the catalog and then turning it into another web project. That's basically just a repurposing of the PDF content online so that more students can access it, and that the accessibility and searchability are a lot better than a PDF is great, but it's very difficult to scan, it's difficult to search, and it's not, it isn't as inclusive as well-designed, well-programmed web content is.
Okay. So what are the next steps for your Instructional Web team?
For the last 6 months, a lot of the work that we've been doing is behind the scenes. So this is a brand new group, so everybody is sort of getting up to speed with all the new stuff. We're using technologies that are more closely tied to what the rest of the world is doing in web development. We've been sort of not really keeping pace with the industry, but we're catching up now. And so developing those processes internally so that the team communicates well, works together. Our number one priority is making sure that all content that leaves our department has a level of accessibility and quality that kind of is appropriate for the output and for the college. That's actually a very difficult task, but we've been working on processes to make sure that checks are in place, that nobody really has too many opportunities for error or to bring down a project or delete something and make a mistake and actually cause a lot of additional problems. So we've built the infrastructure there. No one's ever going to see that, but it is basically just internal tools that allow us to output content at a much faster rate and a much higher quality than we have before.
So if a department or a faculty member needs help with instructional web type of content, who should they contact?
Me right now. We are going to put in place a new ticket system so that if there is ever ongoing maintenance, those types of requests can be processed really fast and dealt with by different members of the team. But right now, for a new project, basically email me directly right now.
Great. Well, thank you for all the information. I'm glad that you came here today because it's a new team and you are offering a really great set of services.
Thanks for the time.